The shooting in Atlanta in 3 massage parlor spas. 8 people died, 6 of them Asian Americans. It was absolutely an act of hate. But was it about race? It's Rob Nelson Live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Friday night special, Rob Nelson Live. You know, we love our Friday nights, although we get smaller and smaller audiences because as, COVID lets up, lockdowns ease up, everybody's going out. Well, I don't know what we're going to do about that. Got to keep you guys in and watching. Coming to you from our beautiful studios in Florida and LA. We multi-coast studio it. And coming to you wherever you're watching, listening, whatever social platform you're on. As always, love all your interaction from Facebook, YouTube, Reddit, and any other platforms. Dive in, get in the conversation with me. I try to respond to things, but either way, Crafty, our producer, puts your stuff up on screen so you can be part of the conversation with each other and with me. Okay, let's dive right in. There he is. Likes to show his little face there sometimes, our dual studios. So let's get right to it, okay? This is a serious one, guys. So the shooting in Atlanta. And, for those of you who don't know, I don't know, you have your head under a rock, but a 21-year-old white man went into three Asian massage parlors and shot a bunch of people, killed 8 people altogether, 6 of them Asian Americans. And, it was shocking, right? Another brutal act of senseless gun violence, right? And it just, every time, we're almost like immune to it. It's just like it hits you, boom. And it's like, another one. But this one triggered a different wave because this one triggered a wave of Asian Americans saying it's time to end the anti-Asian American violence. And to a lot of people, that was violence that was triggered, they believe, by Trump's rhetoric around the virus, which obviously, originated in China, in Wuhan, and variously was called the Wuhan virus. Trump, not to his credit, I don't mind people calling it a virus from China or the Wuhan virus, or whatever you want to call it, but clearly said it prejudicially. He'd be like the China virus. And people believe, perhaps rightly, that triggered a wave of reaction against Asian Americans for being from Asia. So, and that these killings were a logical extension of that. I have a tweet or a quote here from a member of Congress who chairs the Asian American subcommittee. And this is what she had to say. This is the aftermath of a whole year of Donald Trump's using terms China virus and Wuhan virus and creating hatred, said Rep. Democrat California, who's the chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. I laugh because that's in Politico. They left out the name of the rep. And it's almost funny because truthfully, it could just be from Rep. Democrat California or just Rep. Democrat, because basically everything's politicized these days, right? So we will politicize the most horrific shooting. And I want to start by saying that both sides are going to politicize this, just like they politicize everything else, which is exactly the wrong thing to do, but it's exactly what people do. But her point is, and by the way, again, it's like Trump is the cause of everything. I'm just sort of saying it's for how long is what Trump did or said going to be the cause of every single problem we have. But is it true that Trump's rhetoric caused a guy to go into 3 massage parlors and kill a bunch of Asian people? I don't think so. We'll get to whether or not that rhetoric has caused other things to happen. But in this one, was it really about race? I mean, aside from the fact that 2 of the people who were killed were white, still 6 were Asian. The shooter said it had nothing to do with race. He said it had to do with sex. He was a sex addict, and he was ashamed of his sex addiction. He'd visited several of these parlors before and gotten a happy ending massage. And like many people who are mentally disturbed, twisted, full of self-hatred and loathing at something they feel inside themselves, he did the weak, cowardly, and awful thing and went and decided, I'm going to kill the people who provide those services. Now, people said, no. It doesn't matter that that's what he said. He actually, he said it, but he didn't mean it. It was still about race. And the sheriff who was speaking on it did no favors by saying, well, he had a really bad day. I'm sorry. The shooter had a really bad day. I mean, I know the guy didn't mean it to come off that way, but it doesn't matter. Like, really? The shooter had a really bad day? Because I think the people he killed and their families and everybody else had the really bad day. The shooter was just an a-hole who didn't know how to take responsibility for his own issues and his own stuff and decided to punish innocent other people for it. But that said, if he really was doing it about race, if it really was because he didn't like Asian Americans, whether it was because people were saying the China virus and the virus came from China and that rhetoric, or whether he just had a hatred for Asians, doesn't make sense. If you go in and kill people because of their race and you turn yourself in, you don't say that's not why I did it. People who have those racial biases and do it always admit that's why they did it. It's like, yeah, I did it. I shot up the black people in the church because I don't like black people. You know, I shot up gay people because I don't like gay people. I don't think it's right. You know, you don't commit an act of racial violence, turn yourself in for it, and then say it had nothing to do with race. And the fact that he had a sex addiction and had gone to those parlors, you know, seems pretty obvious. Like, I wanted to take the temptation out. I'm not justifying what he did in one slightest little bit. There's absolutely no justification or excuse. I'm saying, but the motives matter in the sense of, was this about an Asian hate crime? Or was this just about a guy who was full of rage inside himself? And like, you know, it's like the serial killers who went after prostitutes, you know, or the people who are super anti-gay, but inside, you know, are gay and want to commit hate acts against gay people. So even if it wasn't about sex, though, people in the Asian community came out and said, no, it's still about racism. Even if it wasn't just about hating Asians, if it was just about sex, well, it was still racist. And here's why. Let me show you a tweet. It's not a tweet. It's a comment out of an article. Killing Asian American women to eliminate a man's temptation speaks to the history of the objectification of Asian and Asian American women as variations of the Asian temptress, the dragon ladies, and the lotus blossoms, whose value is only in relationship to men's fantasies and desires. This is horrifying. Stop fetishizing. That's from an expert on, there were a lot of experts on Asian American affairs talking, and don't get me wrong, I'm not putting these people down or making fun of what she said. I think she truly believes it. He may not have thought he was committing a racist act because he didn't just go out and say, I want to kill Asian people, but he killed the people in the massage parlors because they were Asian women, and Asian women are sexually fetishized. Now, just a simple question for y'all. Does that make more sense that it was because he fetishized Asian women, or that 90% of massage parlors are run by Asians? It's just kind of the way it is. And almost all the happy ending massage parlors are run by Asians. Now, we'll get to in a minute whether these were all happy ending massage parlors. I think 2 of them were. I think 1 of them wasn't. And just because people were in there getting legitimate massages doesn't have anything to do with the fact that many of these massage parlors have sort of a dual thing, right? You can go get a regular massage, and then under the table, you can pay for the happy ending. They stay open till 3 a.m. in the morning. They don't close at like 6 or 9 or 10, like totally legit massage parlors. And when I say legit, I mean not having a prostitution side of the business. Not saying, I'm not making a judgment about whether they should have a prostitution side, just that technically it's not legal. So that's the illegitimate side of the business. But to the fetishism and the argument that Asian women are fetishized and that that's what did this. First of all, let's be clear. That fetishism, which I think does exist, came from Asia and Asian cultures. And does that matter? Well, it does in some sense. I mean, whether it's the geisha in Japan or Confucianism in China, right, which had very strict notions, which still exist today in China, about how women are to be seen and treated and how there's their order in society, which is behind men, and their sexuality as well. These very confining, gender-defining roles, narrowly defining women and fetishizing women came out of Asia. And by the way, it still exists. I mean, seriously, go look at Asian porn. If you want to see fetishization of Asian women, go watch Asian porn or manga, or for that matter, go into a major Japanese city. I mean, molesting women on trains in Japan is so bad that major cities have women-only trains for commuting hours. Like, only women can get on them, because in the mixed trains, men would grab women and just fondle them, and women were told to just be quiet and not say anything, the submissive thing. Again, I'm not saying that doesn't mean that fetishism moved to the U.S. I think to some extent it did. And I don't make a history lesson about Asian fetishism. I can barely say that word. But the reality is, sure, it did. You know, it started way back in the 1800s, you know, with Madame Chrysanthemum, the book. And then that became Madame Butterfly in the early 1900s. And then that became Little Miss Saigon, the big Broadway hit play. And it ultimately became Amy Schumer, who in 2012, doing her Comedy Central special, said, I can't compete with an Asian woman. And she gave 3 reasons why. Hold on that thought on Bitcoin. I'll get to it. Off topic, but I'll get to it. And she gave 3 reasons why she couldn't compete with an Asian woman. She's like, 1, Asian women are good at math. 2, they have naturally silky hair. 3, they cover their mouths when they laugh. She made a joke, which is great because guys don't really like to hear women talk. And 4, she's like, they have the smallest vaginas in the game. Okay, Amy Schumer's canceled, by the way, and Comedy Central and Netflix going to pull down that special. Can never watch that again. But my point is, yeah, people have made fun of Asians, and there's been a sexualization of Asian women, absolutely, in our country. No question about it. But the thing is, this wasn't a crime against Asians. And it wasn't that he was sexually fetishizing Asian women. I don't think that's what's happening. He was going to massage parlors run by Asians, getting happy endings. He felt, again, shame and loathing in himself. And instead of addressing that, dealing with it, owning it, being okay with it, getting help with it, he went and killed people who provide those services. So if you want to say there was a hate crime, it was a hate crime against sex workers. And I'm not belittling that. I think that's what it was. It was a hate crime against sex workers. By the way, sex workers legitimately are among the most discriminated against in so many areas of society and suffer an enormous amount of hate and hate crime, and historically always have. And that's not a protected class of people, but it's certainly a big group of people. I mean, everybody's watching internet porn. So those people making that internet porn are the sex workers. It's not a cultural issue. It's a lack of accurate information. I'm not sure what you mean by that exactly, but I would agree that it's not a cultural issue. I mean, and I'm not sure where the lack of accurate information comes from. I mean, to me, this very clearly was a guy who owned what he did. He said, I had a sex addiction. I hated, that part of me, and I wanted to take the temptation away. I don't think it was about them being Asian per se. And again, I think, the whole part of the sex worker thing's gotten swept under the table. Do you want to think about this? Why don't we know the names of the victims? We only know a few of the victims. We know the white woman who has the biracial son, and we know some of them, but they won't release the names because they're trying to figure out who they are. And the reality is, I don't think the media wants to talk about, which they should, that it was a sex industry. Walton Bleach, the geisha's been replaced with Soapland. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And look, again, I'm not defending the fetishization of Asian women or not defending one or the other. I'm just saying it's got a long, long history in their own cultures. And yes, it got carried out in our culture. And maybe that's something we should address. But I don't think that's what this was about. And the sex worker side is interesting to me because why won't the media acknowledge that, right? I mean, why? Because they don't want to go there? I mean, one of the kids of one of the women who died said, my mom told me never to tell people what she really did. She said to say I worked in a nail salon place or a makeup place. And he's like, I knew I was lying. She could be gone all night. Others talked about how the working conditions were horrible. The women had to stay all night. Let's be honest. A lot of these massage parlors are sex trafficked, right? They bring people in from Asia and they kind of keep them in indentured servitude. You don't have to stay all night and work all night and can't go home at the massage parlor if it's a legit one. And that's an issue right there where they sex trafficked. But again, those are all legit issues to look at. The issue of whether or not, and the hate crime issue in general, I think is a valid one. Daniel Day Kim had a comment in it. I'm going to get to him in a minute with a video, but let's show the quote he said about where this happened. These were places associated with Asian people, Kim said. If this was a synagogue or a black church and someone shot those places, would we really be asking whether this was a hate crime or not? And my answer would be no, we wouldn't. But it is significantly different. The fact that a business is owned primarily by Asians or that a certain type of business is owned by Asians doesn't mean if you commit a crime there, it's against Asians. If you go into a synagogue and you shoot up a synagogue, you clearly are going into a place of worship for Jews and intending to kill the people who worship there. If you happen to be, if you go into a McDonald's in a Latino neighborhood because you're pissed at McDonald's because you hate them for whatever reason, you shoot up a bunch of workers, it's not because you don't like Latinos. You're taking it out on McDonald's. It's a lack of intellect. That's what caused them to feel the need to murder women. I don't know. It's an interesting point. he been a free thinker? I would not disagree with that. I don't know if it's a lack of intellect, but it's a fear of being able to own whatever's inside you. We've created such a repressive society, a repressive culture around sex, and people take that stuff and they shame themselves and they turn it inward, and it's a fear and loathing, right? And absolutely, a person who's a more free thinker, a person who actually can see past that, doesn't do that. And it's the weakest act of cowardice, right? To go out and kill other people because you don't want to deal. Jack the Ripper, right? Killing prostitutes, right? Because you want to take out the thing that you find that you're attracted to. I mean, it's, again, the weakest side of human nature. Sex work is dangerous. I agree sex work is dangerous because people have to deal with it. But I also think part of the problem is we don't want to face that. We don't want to acknowledge and legitimize sex work, right? I think if we took sex work out of the shadows, and I've always said, I think we should legalize prostitution. I think we should legalize most sex work. It would actually be a better thing. You could regulate it. You could have health precautions. The porn industry does that. And while there's certainly I used to do a show with a porn star, some of you may know, called Sex Think. And while there's a lot of people in the porn industry who are in there who are like just high on drugs and stuck, a lot of them are really, smart, well-educated, making great incomes, and they have a union and they take care of themselves. So legitimizing the sex industry rather than putting it in the shadows, because again, who's really suffering from that? It's the women who suffer from that, right? The guys who come in and use the sex industry, who pay for it, they're fine, the Johns. It's the people who are stuck in doing it and don't have any protections around them. Let me take one more comment here from MC Dumpsterweed. Yeah, I agree with you. Only people losing are yeah. Well, again, I don't know. That's another show. I would actually argue sex work can be empowering, and it's a feminist argument that goes back, and the French feminists, especially, about 30 years ago, the idea that sex work can be empowering. I don't think it's inherently empowering or disempowering. I mean, I had a woman on my talk show on Fox who was a prostitute at a brothel, the famous brothel outside, legal brothel in Reno, outside of Reno, the chicken ranch. I think I got the name wrong. And I had her on, and she talked about how she was putting her kid through a private school. And, she was like, I'm making a conscious choice to do this to make money. And I'm getting a lifestyle that allows me and my son's going to have a better future. I don't know that there was any shame at all in that, I mean, you watch this woman, it was like she was empowered. So is it inherently empowering? Not necessarily, but it doesn't have to be disempowering. Putting it in the shadows makes it disempowering. Okay, moving on, because I want to get to something that I think, okay, well, let me actually shift gears right now to it. I'm going to jump over the hate crime issue. And Crafty, let's hold on to those hate crime statistics for a second. I want to move to something else, because you want to talk about something that I think really is an example of a hate crime, that is like blatant hate crime, is what happened last week that got very little attention when the Pope and the Vatican said that they could not bless gay marriage. Got a little headline for you. The Vatican won't bless same-sex unions, but will bless child molesters. That is not a pun, because the child molesting priests still get blessed, but same-sex sex unions don't. And here's what they said in this letter, which the Pope signed off on. Pope Francis signed off on. These are quotes. God cannot bless sin. Gay sex is, quote, intrinsically disordered, and gay unions are not part of God's plan. Okay. You want to talk about sending messages of hate. You think Trump saying China virus caused a wave of anti-Asian hate. The Pope, the leader of one of the biggest churches on the planet, billions of people, enforces a message that says, if you are gay, God can't bless your sin, because you can be blessed as a gay person, but if you're a gay person having sex, getting married, God can't bless it. Gay sex is intrinsically disordered. That's a quote, intrinsically disordered. And gay unions aren't part of God's plan. So if you're having a gay union, God ain't for it. What kind of message does that send to people who are devout, religious Catholic people who go, I got to follow the Lord's word? If they're doing it, I went to a Christian college. I know a guy who committed suicide right after college because he was gay and so ashamed of it. But then all the people who look at it and go, well, if it ain't God's plan, I got a right to take him out. Think about that. If you think China virus makes a guy think he's going to go into a massage parlor and kill a bunch of Asian workers there, what would it do if you think God's literally said, it ain't okay to do this, and the Pope told me that? Can I go be hateful? Can I go commit acts of violence against gay people? I don't think God would mind that. Now, I know the Pope and the Catholic Church would say, no. It doesn't say you can be violent. But, saying China virus doesn't say you can be violent. Sending a message that what you're doing, God can't bless. It's not in God's plan. It's intrinsically disordered. Certainly sends a horrible message to you if you're gay. And if you are a person who's very Catholic, that somehow that's really bad. So you have to hate on it and you have to stop it. And if it happens to you, it's horrible. And if it happens to your son, it's even more horrible. Or what if it's your, it just goes on and on. That's hate. That's real hate. And why did that get so little attention? Why aren't we canceling the Pope? Seriously. I mean, I'm sort of over the whole thing. Like, it's like, the Pope gets put on this pedestal for being so progressive and all that. Well, not that progressive. Not going to go that far. We want to talk about hate. That's hate right there. That's deep-seated hate. Now, I'm not saying there isn't hate being leveled against Asian Americans right now. I do want to show two tweets that came out in the wake of that. The first one was Suzanne Smith. Suzanne Smith is an author. She wrote the book, The Altar Boys, award-winning book about gay priests and the whole thing. Thus, the hypocrisy of the statement by the Pope, at Catholic Church won't bless that same-sex marriages. Again, her point being because, well, look how they look the other way on priest abuse and continue to look the other way on priest abuse, by the way. A lot of those guys who did it, they got rearranged, moved somewhere else. Very few criminal prosecutions, despite the huge scandal a year and a half ago when it came out how many kids had been abused by priests. And then this tweet, which I thought was interesting also. This is the same clever institution that told women if they had unprotected sex with their AIDS-infected husbands that they were martyrs for the faith. I mean, the Catholic Church has a long way to go. Not to mention, Bill Donahue, who's the president of the Catholic League, a huge American Catholic organization, came out and said, this is it. See, end of story. Gay agenda is dead. All happy and like, woohoo. This is the same guy who in 2018, when the whole thing came out about the Pennsylvania priest abuse stuff and the 1,000+ kids who'd been abused said they weren't raped because they weren't penetrated, just groped. Seriously? That's the Catholic, really? That's Catholic leadership? I mean, so my point is, that's a real hate that got very little attention, and that has destructive consequences all over. What happened to these women in these massage parlors is absolutely an act of hate. And whether there is a rise in hate crimes against Asians, maybe there is. There's actually statistics, so there's been a big argument that the number of hate crimes have been going up and up and up. And there's an organization called Stop Anti-Asian Hate Crime. And it's a new organization, but they reported almost 4,000 incidents of hate crime in the last year. Yet at the same time, a little number here show you of the number of police departments. Crafty, do we have that graphic thing there of the police departments? If not, no big deal. Of the number of police departments, this is statistics for FBI. 4,900 victims claiming hate crimes. 4% were Asian, compared to 48% Black and 14% Hispanic. And police departments themselves, 90% of police departments say they reported no incidents of hate crime last year, which leads people to go, really, how is that possible? But it leads some people to also go, well, maybe there are a lot less hate crimes than people are saying. And of the 4,000 hate crimes that Stop APPI, pointed out, 80% of them were verbal, somebody saying something verbally. Now, I'm not saying it's okay to say a nasty thing to a person, but I have people say nasty things to me all the time. I have posts, cut in front of someone in traffic and they call me all kinds of names. If I call you a name, is it disgusting? Is it hateful? Sure. But is it a hate crime? If 80% of those are words being said, is it okay? No. Should we tolerate it? No. But is it a hate crime? And was this a hate crime? Yes. But was it a hate crime about race? I would say no. I want to play what Daniel Day Kim said, part of what he said. I did his quote, but I want to play part of what he said about today or yesterday when he was in front of Congress.
The House had just recently passed H.R. 908, condemning all forms of anti-hate Asian sentiment. But I was disheartened to find that for a bill that required no money or resources, just a simple condemnation of acts of hate against people of Asian descent, 164 members of Congress, all Republican, voted against it. And now here I am again, because as every witness in this hearing has pointed out, the situation has gotten worse, much worse.
So why do I play that? Because two interesting things. One, shame on every Republican who voted against that. That's the politics I hate. You voted, look, how hard is it to vote for something that simply says we're not going to tolerate this? You can't do that because it doesn't fit your agenda. He's right to single out the Republicans. He does it a little snidely, but whatever. You still live with the votes you make. I'm sick of everything being a partisan divide, including this right now with, conservatives and saying it, I'm not being conservative and saying I don't think this was about race, but saying everything has to be about race, and Democrats using this to some extent as a political tool. Yeah, okay. I missed that comment, but okay. But, using it as a political tool, right? Just like they did with school shootings, right? I mean, remember I talked about, doing a thing on one of the school shootings and the kid who stepped in front of the shooter to prevent, his friends from getting killed. And they held a memorial for him, and anti-gun activists came in and Democratic activists came in and used it as a platform about gun violence. And the kids were like, get the F out of here. This is us doing our thing, right? So on the one hand, Asian Americans and the victims of this are legitimately distraught, but it's being politicized. It's being politicized like, we want our time too now. Focus on hate against Asians. But Daniel Day Kim's point, right? It has gotten worse. In fairness, I'm not Asian American. I don't know what it's like to live in their shoes. Maybe there is a lot more hatred against them than I'm aware of. I mean, it's an interesting sidebar on dating apps. When they've done surveys, Asian women come out as the #1 choice for everybody. Everybody wants to date an Asian woman except Asian men. And Asian women like to date white men. But it's interesting, right? It's Latinos, blacks, whites like to date Asian women. Is that the sexual fetishization thing? I don't know. But, when we look at hate and hate crimes and hate bias, by overblowing it, oversimplifying it, it makes one side feel more victimized, not a good thing. And it makes another side feel more like, really? Again? And that gets us nowhere, moves us no closer to addressing the real fact that there is hate against all different kinds of groups. And Asian Americans, I'm sure, are facing hate, partly because of the virus coming from China, whether it's Trump saying that or not, just a fact. Partly because there's bias against people who aren't like us. And either way, that bias and that hate needs to be addressed and needs to stop. Over politicizing it doesn't do it. What happened in Atlanta was a hate crime. I believe it was a hate crime against sex workers. And it was a disgusting act of a guy who hated himself for some of the reasons that the Pope saying you can't be gay play into. But I don't think it was about race. It's Rob Nelson Live. Thanks for watching.